Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Good morning, everybody. My name is Neil Robinson, and I'm a senior engineering lead at Microsoft. And with me, a co-presenter, or the demo guy, is Swami Narayana.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good time at Convergence. Welcome. And if you are having any side effects, just blame it on the Atlanta water. But welcome to the first session of the last day.
Hope Convergence is going very well for everybody, and definitely for me. It's a great chance to meet more and more people. Normally, they don't let engineers out and roam around in wild and talk to you. It's usually just PMs. But because I was a PM working on budget planning, Swami asked me to come back and help talk a little bit about it. So I'm going to read every line of the disclaimer before we start, just to warm it up. I know it lightens the cloud. Today, we're going to be talking about budgeting. More specifically, we're going to focus on some of the longer-term things, what we introduced in R2 and then further augmented since then. But we'll cover a little bit more about all the types of planning we have, be it from long-term and strategic planning, from formulating your budget, from operational, capital, revenue budgets, and to do a little bit of forecasting as well. We're not really going to delve into budget control, although, of course, we showed that in 2012. So can I get a show of hands how many people are familiar with AX 2012's functionality for budgeting? Okay, we've got a few people. What about work done in R2 for budget planning? Okay, good audience then for that. So in AX 2012 was when we really had a real look at budgeting, and we decided what we had in 2009 was much a smaller amount, and we really wanted to make it, though, to work with public sector, work with larger organizations that really had a need to be able to control their budget. They really wanted to report on it and see what they had. And we added a lot of functionality around dimensional integration, around categorization, and specifically around the ability to integrate with other systems and bring data in. So it was all about controlling and entering, but not about managing your budget, but not about determining what your budget was going to be. We supported if you had enough budget, say, you could budget at a department level, you could budget at a division level, or even down at an account level. And then we added workflows, so if you decided that perhaps the fire department did not have enough budget, you could transfer some of it from the police department. Although I'm sure the police department might complain a bit, and you've got a workflow for that. We do budgeting by cycle, so that if you're doing budgeting, you can do it for a fiscal year, perhaps if you do it every 2 years, areas like that. And we have thresholds, so you can set it up. So there's hard stops or just warnings. So you can go to 90%, you get a budget notification, or if you go up to, say, 100, we'll keep warning you, but we'll really stop you at 110%. Within that, we use a number of rules to determine what type of budget control you have. And we have a whole pile of screens on reports on budget funds available. So you can see for any dimensional combination how much budget you'll have left and how much you've used. If you're using it for encumbrance, for pre-encumbrance, or just straight the actual budget itself, a lot of there. It's an extensible framework, and it gives you coverage obviously for purchase orders, invoices, requisitions. And we've added a number of other documents that will support it. And I've definitely worked with a few customers that have added budget control to another one of their source documents. So that all came in 2012. In R2, we introduced budget planning, which is where I kind of came in. And that was dealing with the ask that we need to know how to set up our budget. We could manage it, but we want to be able to plan it and work on it. And there's a very different set of needs about that. You typically deal with a smaller group of people, you have a much more complex workflow, and you're very concerned about the organization, and oftentimes, specifically if you're doing with an HR budget, then you want to have a lot of security around it, because I want to make sure that only very specific people can see what was being budgeted, what's being asked. And that really gets into the scenarios we have, because you might say, imagine that you're going to have 30% less headcount. Well, that's going to cause a lot of concern. But as long as the budget planning people are aware of it, they know it's a planning exercise, but others may not take it that way. We support scenarios, so you can do a lot of what-ifs if you want, and we have the ability to control within the stages of the budget, you're able to see different amounts. Maybe at the beginning, I've got my last year's actuals, then I want to see what the target was that came from the budget manager. And then you can go and say a what if I want to do, if we added a 5% to our budget. Let's see how that looks. To be able to control it, we heavily rely on the workflow in AX 2012. Are people here familiar with the workflow? A few people. So for each organizational level, you can actually have a whole different workflow that control who can approve it, who can see it, and how many actions go through it. Now, how many of you have done budgeting for an organization? There we go. Got the most show of hands. What tool do you use right now? Excel. Right. Everybody uses Excel for budgeting. Even if you have another system, you still use Excel for budgeting. It's awesome. So we decided that when we worked on budget planning, it was really important for us to integrate Excel as much as possible. We loved Excel. We loved the flexibility, the ability to do what-if charts and all these things. However, what's the problem with Excel? Well, one of the big things I have, well, I know with Swami, but Swami, I emailed you my budget. Not revision 4, but no, I think I emailed you revision 10. Did you take a look at that one?
Yeah.
See, the big thing about Excel is it's a single document. Maybe it's on a file share. You decide to go on a flight. You work on it there. You come back. You're not sure if it's saved. You don't have the right one. What we did was we tried to integrate the Excel experience into budget planning so we're able to have the master data always in AX. However, it was surfaced and you're edited and controlled in Excel. And that's the experience we wanted. We did work on the what we call allocation and aggregation so that we can take information, say you've got it at a divisional level, we can break it down to the departments. Or if we're going later on for review at a higher level, when the CFO reviews, he's not going to look at the individual department level. He wants it all up, perhaps by business unit. So depending what dimensions you have, we can roll up and aggregate that data. One of the other big pieces, if you're budgeting in Excel, is you've got to get that data out into and bring it into Excel. Well, because we're controlling it all inside AX, we natively supply you with the ability to pull in last year's actuals in from the general ledger, the ability to pull in data for position forecasting and such from HR, and bring in fixed assets data. So you're starting your budget with all the information in AX natively there. You don't have to cut and paste or ask somebody to do a report for you. And we think that's the strength. I really want to talk a little bit more about concepts. All of these terms that I'm going to describe here is what Swami is going to show you in a minute or two. I'll promise I won't keep you too long because I think the demos are the best part of the show. But our first big concept is the process. And for us, the budget planning process is what you're going to describe, be it for preparing a budget, a forecast, or activity. It's typically going to be done for one area. That area could be your entire company, or it could just be a small departmental budget if you want to manage it at that level. But that's the unit you're doing. Once you've completed, that's the budget that we're going to want to say move into budget control. Around it, for each one, we have different workflows. And the workflows help us determine what needs to go through, what are the steps as we move through this. We have a number of manual tasks you do. Perhaps the CFO has to approve it, and then maybe that's probably going to be the last step, but you'll have the finance director or someone else. And then we'll have a number of automated tasks to handle this allocation and this aggregation that I talked about a little bit earlier. So putting it all together, for budget planning, we have it on the organizational hierarchy. Have people looked at that in 2012? Maybe a few of them, so that you can basically, if you take an organizational hierarchy and any one you want, you can basically apply that and do budgeting at that level. So it can start at the top, say the finance, and move down, or it depends on how your organization is structured. We also have time period. That's probably the easiest one. Budgets are typically over 1 year, but if you need to have it over a 2-year budget or an 18-month, or if you're doing some forecasting model, you can do a 5-year forecast. Okay. So now we'll go into a couple of the more complicated ones. For us, the budget planning stage is one of the most important things for us to manage how you look at a budget. A single stage is a view of your budget at that time while you're working on it. And if you're doing a budget that flows down to a department level, that stage is going to be very detailed. It'll have specific information about, say, last year's actuals and then the target that the department manager is entering. that view is going to be very different than as it rolls up, as it goes to, say, the division head, or it goes to all the way to the CFO. They are going to see a different view of it, and per stage, we control what you can see and what you can edit. That's very important. We also have the concept of scenario. So a scenario is it lets you see a different set of amounts, some categorization, and it lets you, how to put it, this is what you're going to control and what you can edit. Last year's actuals are typically going to be a scenario that will be always available, but can never be edited. The amount requested by the department, maybe you have a department request amount, that one is going to be edited by the department manager, maybe edited again by his manager, but after that, it as well is going to be read-only. And we can have as many scenarios as you want to set up. So if I want to have a what if I've got a 10% increase, 10% reduction, those can be two different scenarios. We can see those side by side and work with them. And then finally, to wrap it all up and to tie in the stage, the scenario, we bring in constraints that control, as I said, what you can see and what you can edit. And then we also have templates so that what we're going to show you in Excel can be different for every specific stage and control the scenarios. And then the last piece, the last concept of what we call stage allocations, is that for a specific stage, I may want to aggregate data from a previous stage, or I may want to disperse it down. And in those cases, these allocations, we want to have them automatically, if possible. And if not, we'll have manual ones to do that as well. So what I'm going to do now is hand it over to Swami, and he's going to actually walk through a large number of demos so that can give you a real feel for the product, because just me talking here is not going to help as much.
Thanks, Neil. So what we are going to do is we're going to cover the three aspects of budgeting, which is the planning, which gives you the long-term planning horizons, multi-year planning. Then we're going to actually take it into the budgeting, which is the near term, which could be an annual budget or a biannual budget. Then I'm going to actually transfer that into ledger budget so you can actually enforce budget control. Then finally, I'm going to talk about forecasting, where you're revising your quarterly forecast or monthly forecast. So the story I'm going to talk through today is actually Contosa has been in business for a few years in Europe. They have a lot of aspirations in terms of growing their business. How do they build their strategy? What their objectives are. How AX can help you do that kind of a strategy planning within our budgeting module. So that's kind of our initial story I want to tell you. So the way you want to think about it is, if you recall from what just Neil talked about, we want to think about that each process is different. So now I'm talking about strategy planning as a process, which has a department finance, which is going to participate because they are managing the overall strategy for the organization. It has two different stages. You're going to have a proposed stage where you look at the historical information. You're going to do some projection for the next few years and look at how many headcount you need to have to achieve the goals you want to achieve in the coming years. Then once you have that information ready, you will actually go through some kind of an approval, which gets it into the final stage. At that stage, all your information is pretty locked. It's a very, very simple scenario, but just to give you an idea about how budgeting can be used for this kind of a strategy planning is what the scenario I'm going to walk through. As Neil said, I'm the demo guy. I'll spend more time on demo and less time on slides. So I've logged in as the administrator, so I'm going to be the finance guy as well as the administrator of the system. You will see the budget area. These are the things we did in AX 2012 and R2, and few more enhancements in the latest cumulative updates in R3. So if you look at it here, you will see that you have the budget, ledger budget area. They're all around budget register entries and budget, basic budgeting and budget control. Then we also have a lot of budget planning areas, which are all in the budget plan notes. And you have the configuration around here. We have a lot of the periodic processes that Neil talked about, how we integrate with GL, fixed assets, and HR. I will walk through all of those things. To start off, let me just give you how we look at budgeting. If I go into the all budget plans, it'll show me all the budget plans. Since I'm the administrator, I get to see all of the budget plans I have created so far. I can look at it based on my assigned to me. I can look at everything that's active, or things that are created by my organization. That means anybody in my organization, I'm able to look at it. To start off, we'll take a look at the strategy planning. I've already created a document for us to start off. If you look at it here on the document, at the header level, you can see what process this particular document belongs to. who is the responsibility center. In this case, finance is managing the strategy planning. It's in the stage of proposed. So in this stage, you will see the different scenarios I have. I'm going to draw your attention to the fact boxes we show, which will give you all the scenarios that are applicable. Here I can see the revenue, which is, what's the prior year revenue and PPY revenue. These are the different scenarios I can look at. I can also look at by the quantity ways, which gives me the headcount information. I can also see this information by detail level by picking the specific scenario. But as a finance user, as Neil pointed out, we all like to see this in Excel, not in a typical client forum. To do that, what we have done is you can actually click on the worksheet. What it does is the system basically says there is a template designed by the administrator for that particular scenario, the process and the stage. It will pull all that data into a format that you have designed and present that information to you in a nice little format that you are comfortable with. So here you will see that I have two different business units and I have departments in all my sales, and I have a lot of aspirations in growing my business. As you can see, I want to grow my business at 80%. I also want my salespeople to produce 80% productivity. That means there's a very high aspirations for this organization. So I can look at my historical information. These are read-only. I won't be able to make any edits. It tells me what was my 2012 revenue, what was my 2013 revenue, what was the headcount in those scenarios. So typically when you do this kind of exercise, you are modeling what variables you have control over. In this case, I've picked two, the revenue growth aspiration and my productivity increase by each salespeople. So if I make changes to this one, let's just say 80% growth is probably not achievable. What happens if I make that into 30%? Oh, I can probably reduce my headcount by 11. That may not be possible. We don't want to probably cut. We want to grow. And if you look at the productivity, 80% growth by each salesperson year by year may not be again possible. So I can change that into 20%. That tells me how, if I change this variable, what impact that has on my headcount as well as my revenue projection. Right? You can make this kind of an analysis in a very complicated way and do all of those calculations within the Excel. It will also show how it impacts it. So if you look at this number now, it tells me that if I want to achieve this kind of a growth as well as my increase, I need to add my 4 different positions. Salespeople need to be added to some department. First, now let's just say I'm going to go give that to the Denmark team because they've been doing well. I'll add that headcount to 24, and I can make the adjustment for the revenue as well. I'll probably change their revenue to 250. That'll add up to 338. Similarly, I can make changes for future year as well. Once I make these changes, I'm able to go ahead and say, now that I have the revenue projection, I want to publish this date back into AX, so that becomes the record or the source of truth for all my future analysis. The takeaway from here is I'm able to use Excel, I'm able to capture all the information, model my future growth and other things, and see how it impacts my headcount and the future revenue. Once I make all these changes, if I want to publish it, I just go to the Dynamics AX. This is where we take advantage of the Office add-in. I'm going to publish this information. Now, all the things I made changes, they're back in AX as a system of record. You'll see that publishing went very well. I'm going to close that. So what we have done is now that I made these changes, all my parameters that I used to come up with my projection is also in the same Excel that's attached to that same document. So if I go back into my document here and if I refresh, you'll see that how it impacted my revenue, how it impacted my headcount as well. So you can see all the information right away in the document. It also takes that particular document, I just created an Excel document and attaches it to the document here. So I can launch that document anytime from this point onwards. So now that I made these changes, I want this to go through CFO for approval. All I have to do is go ahead and submit this document to workflow. You'll see in a second that it gets into approval. Hopefully my CFO approves it. We can go ahead and approve that when it comes back. So what I've done is so far is basically taken the information from the historical date, my last year revenue, my last year headcount. I said, what if I want to achieve X number of growth, X percentage of productivity, increase my salespeople, how it impacts, make those changes back into the system. What I want to take away from here is I talked about increasing the headcount for Denmark by 4, how I'm going to implement that in the next operational budget. Okay. I'm going to go approve this one. You'll see that once it's approved, it will go ahead and become proposed to the final stage. At that point, nobody can make any more changes. It's pretty locked in the system. You can look at it, but you won't be able to make changes because the strategy plan is set in stone. So you'll see that the stage has become final. So that completes our initial scenario where we were able to do the strategy planning, which will look at the historical trend, look at the multi-year in the future, and do some analysis in terms of how it impacts your operational budget. So the next thing I want to do is, now that I have the strategy planning for the next 3 years, I want to talk about the next year annual budget, right? I want to do the budgeting for the next 1 year. It typically involves two components. Most of the organizations have most of the costs come from workforce planning, which is your salary, benefits, and the other cost associated with the personnel. Then we have a lot of operational expense planning. So I'll break this into two different parts and walk you through how AX will support doing planning for all of these components. So the first one, again, I'm going to keep it very simple. We're going to talk about the workforce planning. In this case, the department that's going to manage this process is HR. It's going to have an initial where we look at the head count by each department business unit. We will look at the total cost, which includes your salaries, overtime, your benefits, all of the information, which once it's created by the HR person, it gets reviewed by CFO, then it gets to the final stage. So I'm basically able to take through this step just for the workforce planning. Let's do the workforce planning. Thanks, Neil. So this is one of the things we have done very unique compared to any other product you see in the marketplace. We have brought together the different modules, whether it's GL, whether it's HR, whether it's budgeting or fixed asset. They're all connected very well out of the box. So to support the HR side, I'm going to go to the HR area. And if you look at it here, what we have done in the budgeting aspect, your position costs are determined based on the number of positions you have, which employee is taking that position, whether that position is vacant or, you are going to hire a new person. Instead of modifying the live position information, we created a place called forecast position. This is where you can model any kind of scenario within the forecast position without impacting your actual live position. This gives you an ability to model your workforce without having to impact, and until you get the approval, you don't be impacting any of the current positions. So if I look at the positions, forecast position, it's always attached to a planning process. In this case, I have a HR process, and I can attach a scenario to that. In this case, I've kept it simple to a total cost. You'll see all the positions I have here. Let's just go take a look at one of the positions to see what information I'm able to look at it. So the first thing I want to highlight is that there is something called forecast state. If it's an existing position, that means I have a position currently. It's filled by an employee. It will show you, it's an existing position. It has all the plan details, whether it's what's the full-time equivalent, what's the activation date, when the thing was generated. If there was a compensation group, it will tell you those. And then the last, but not the least, is the key element to that is the budget cost element. This is where you are able to define, based on the position and based on the compensation level, what type of budget components are applicable for this forecast position. In this case, I have a 401k, which is a retirement plan in US. I have a group medical, I have a bonus, and I have a base pay. Let's go take a look at how these components are created. If you look at the 401k, you'll see that it's a cost type of other, and it will tell you the cost calculation is based on, in this case for CEE, it's a 3%, 3%, but also limited to an annual limit of $7,650. How is that 3% calculated? It's defined based on the calculation basis. In this case, it's based on just the base pay. So I can use any of the type which is defined as earning as a basis for my any calculations. And then if I look at the bonus, what I have here is similar. It's a 5%. There is no annual limit. So again, based on the base pay. It will define the calculation, how it's going to be done, what's the cost basis, which main account need to be used for that particular cost, and it gives you a couple of options. One is you can define by percentage, an amount, and a percentage with an annual limit. So if you look at the base pay, it will give you the actual base pay, and If I look at the medical, medical, it will tell you the annual amount is just 20,000 in one case. So you have the ability to define different cost element and how they are calculated. Now that I have looked at the positions, if you recall from our strategy planning, we were going to add 4 new positions. How do I go about doing it? There are a couple of ways we support out of the box. One is if I want to bring the existing position, that's how I created all these positions. I just say add existing positions. Or I can create a new position or copy a selected one. Right? Let's just do the selected one since we are adding some consultants in the professional services UK. Let's go create an add new position, copy the selected forecast position. I can click, and I'll click continue. In this case, I'm able to just not only make one copy, so I can say if I'm going to add 4 senior consultants, I'm just going to add 3 of them here, and I'm going to bring all the financial dimensions, which defines all the defaults and the budget cost elements defined on the current forecast.
Is that effective as of today, Swami?
I'm going to make that as 1/1/24. I think that's the budget we're planning for right now, right? So I'm going to make that as 1/1/2014 and copy. Now it may automatically help to create 3 new positions based on an existing position. So if I refresh this and go take a look at it, you'll see all the information came over based on the position that I was copying. Let me just show you another scenario. Now that this is something I'm going to add, I'm going to add a new position by create a new forecast position. In this case, I get to be able to select how I'm going to forecast this particular position. I'm going to pick the job. Need to find the right position. I'm going to pick another senior consultant here, and I'm going to attach it to the HR process. I'm going to put the total cost again. It's the same scenario I'm going to use, and I'm going to make this again effective as of 1/1/2014. So I'll create this position, and once I create the position, I can actually make more changes to this. So let's take a look at some of the default information I can create. So one thing you will notice that when I create a new one, it will mark that as a proposed position. It's not an existing position, it's a proposed position. And I can look at the financial dimensions here. I can actually attach a template, or I can pick the individual information. So in this case, I'm going to do it to the UK one, so professional services. And just need to pick the department. I'm going to pick the professional services for UK. So now those dimensions are defaulted to every budget cost element. I'm going to go ahead and add. But the next thing I want to do is talk about how do I get the salary information? Because in this case, I don't know what position I'm hiring. So for that, I'm going to look at the compensation information. Here, I'm going to pick the compensation group, which will be a consultant group. So once I add that consultant group, I have already defined certain benefits that particular compensation group is eligible for. You'll see that it automatically adds those budget cost elements right away. But it still hasn't known what the basis for the base pay. For that, I'm going to go ahead and pick a compensation grid. And here I'm going to say maybe I'm going to hire this as step 2 and step 1. So automatically it will add that. Now you will see that based on the compensation grid, it will go ahead and pull the base pay for that particular compensation grid. Now you will see that it's 71,000 because that's how I've defined my compensation grid. Now I have the full information for this position. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So you will see that now I have 4 different positions that if you recall from our strategy planning, we were going to add 4 positions. I've added them. 3 of them I copied. 1 of them I actually updated, created from scratch. You'll notice that there is no department I've defined. Maybe I should go ahead and edit that one as well. I'm going to edit and add the professional services here. That's okay. So I'm going to save that one. Now I've basically modeled all my forecast positions. Now I have all the information I need to project my workforce cost. How do I take this information from my forecast positions to the actual budget plan? For that one, we actually provide out of the box a basic process to bring that data from forecast positions to your budget planning area. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the generate budget plan from forecast positions. You will see that this is a very common pattern we have used across in any of the processes we do for budget planning. I have the ability to create a new plan. I can replace the existing scenario. That means if you're going to do a couple of the iterations of modeling, you want to bring them and refresh your data, you can do that. Or if you're going to do multiple modeling, you can say that I'm going to do my workforce modeling based on the current workforce and maybe another scenario where I'm going to add a 10% increase in the workflows. You can bring those kind of things as different scenarios and bring that back into budget planning. In that case, I'm able to go ahead and say, update an existing plan, but bring me different scenarios so I can look at it side by side and make a right recommendation. So for this one, I'm going to do a create new plan. We'll pick the process, which is HR. We'll bring that into total cost. Okay. And the target is going to be a document I'm going to pick, and since this is an expense, I can leave that, and scenario is going to be the headcount for the headcount, because I not only want the total cost, I also want to bring the headcount information by each department. I can do that, and I'm going to give it a name called HR 2014. So I have all the information. If you want to do some manipulation of data, you could, but in this case, I probably won't do any of those changes, but I will show that scenario in the next demo when we do. I do need a main account for that. Okay. I have already defined a statistical account for headcount. I'm going to attach that and then generate the plan.
So did you notice that Swami is able to track not just monetary amounts, but also other statistical amounts? We can actually use almost any unit of measure for planning, which is something that we don't have in budget control yet.
So once I have done it, the process will run. It will go create this document based on my forecast position model. Let's go take a look at the detail behind it. You will see that the headcount information has come, and I can also actually link it to the actual forecast position I created. If I wanted to go look at it, I can see which forecast position created that particular line item. I can also look at my total cost, which includes all my salaries and all the benefit elements I defined before. It will show me that, again, those lines are also linked to the forecast position if I want to look at it. Again, as a finance person, this may not be enough information for me. I certainly get the head count. I certainly get the total cost. But I'm interested in looking at how much of that is salaries, how much of that is different benefit components. For that, a better tool might be Excel. I would imagine you would agree with me. So I'm going to go and take a look at this in the worksheet. Again, for this one, I've defined a template that allows me to view this data in a way that makes sense for my scenario and my process. So you will see here that, familiar to the previous demo, you'll see the same document information. You'll see the business unit. I have the headcount from each of the business units that add up. Here you can see that though I have the detailed information in AX, in Excel, I'm able to bring that information that's sufficient for me to analyze the data. I also included that into what I call the salaries, the benefits, and the other benefits, medical insurance and other benefits and the total cost. Now that I have in Excel, I also can take advantage of the typical things I'm able to do. I can put a graph here. I can create another pivot table. I can do some conditional formatting. I can actually look at the total across all the lines. So I'm able to take advantage of my tools that I'm familiar with, but the source of truth still belongs in AX. So I'm not going to make any changes here because it's coming from forecast position. I want to leave all the information in the HR side, and I'm going to just submit this document to CFO for approval. So it will go through the process similar to the last scenario. It will take it to the next stage, and you can orchestrate the whole process from request to the final stage. So that completes our first part of the operational budget where we are doing the workforce planning. We'll take a look at the next scenario. So we just completed the workforce planning part of it. Now I'm going to talk about the few things that we do in AX. A couple of things, as Neil mentioned, we use workflow for managing the whole process. If you look at any typical workflow within AX, you always see a lot of the manual processes and automated processes too. But if you look at the budget one, we have added some specific things that make sense for budgeting, are required for budgeting. If you look at one of them on the manual is, if you are doing a top-down distribution and you want to wait for them to bring it back so you can aggregate them at the top level, you have a task for that to say review associated budget plans to complete. So the task will wait for everybody in the children to complete before it takes it to the next stage. Similarly, we have a lot of automated tasks. We have something for stage allocation. When you saw from going from proposed to final, that was something that the workflow was able to manage based on your configuration. And we have the stage allocation, and we have the activate associated plan. You would use that task when you are doing allocation from top to bottom. You want to create from business units different department plans. You can automate that through the workflow. You don't have to do this manually. I will show those things in the next demo. There's a typical sequence when you look at these tasks. When you want to distribute from top to bottom, you will always say activate. That will create all the child plans. Then you typically do a stage allocation because you want to take the scenarios on the parent and distribute that into the child. Similarly, if you look at the aggregate, you will wait for the children to be complete because you don't want to take it to the next stage until the children are complete. Then you will do a transition, then you will do an allocation, so you can take all the scenarios from the bottom or the children and aggregate that into the top. And you will always do a stage transition either whenever you do review or approve task. These are typical patterns you see. You don't have to use it, but you will end up using because you know that this is the right set of sequence for your business process. So let's take the next complex scenario. This is probably the most complex one I'm going to walk through. So in this case, I'm going to do the operational expenditure planning. In this case, a CFO or somebody at the central financial planning team want to look at your historical data coming from GL. What was your actuals? You may not have the information for the whole year. Then you might want to look at the actuals for the X number of periods that you have closed, but you want to estimate that into the full year data. Then provide a guidance, which is typically a 3% increase, 4% increase, or a decrease, or whatever the strategy is. So once you have the enterprise level data, you want to be able to take that information and automatically create the budget plans for your business units, your departments, and the departments will go through the request process, and then they submit it. That gets rolled up into the business unit, and the business unit manager has an opportunity to review it, and then the business unit manager approves it. That goes to CFO for a review and approval. Then it goes to the final stage. At that point, you want to take that budget into the ledger side. So this is the process. This is probably the most lengthy process you want to use. So I'm going to walk you through the whole step from starting from GL, doing the allocation from the top down, doing the actual bottom up, request up, and then transitioning into the ledger. Thanks, Steve.
And the button pusher.
Thank you. It's very much appreciated. So again, out of the box, we provide you the functionality so you can bring the data from GL. As you might have guessed, I'm going to use the process to generate budget plan from GL. Similar to the same one last time, but you have more parameters because you're bringing data from GL. As I said, you may not have the data for the full year. You might have just completed the 6 months or closed the 6 periods. So I'm going to say, I'm going to bring the data from GL for the 2013. I'm going to use information from period 1 to period 6 because that's all the months I've closed. And I'm going to only bring the expense data in this case. I could do further granular selection if I wanted to by main account category or account. And I'm going to bring those into an OpEx planning process. And we have several things we support. One thing is called historical. If you leave that historical to S, what AX allows you to do is bring data on a daily basis. If you posted GL into different days, it would bring at the granular level. If you set that historical to no, it will aggregate the data by across the year, bring that into the future year for your planning purposes. And that's what I want to do because I'm only using this for planning. I'm not going to use any seasonality. But if you're doing a revenue planning, you want to look at the seasonality, you might want to bring the historical data as is. I'm going to put that into my actuals and call it OpEx plan, OpEx for 2014. So a couple of things I want to use here. One thing is you can always automatically, if you want to give a 4% increase based on the actuals, you could do that by putting a factor here. Or I could also say minimum, a lot of times in the planning process, you're not interested in bringing, pennies and dollars. If it's anything less than $50, don't bring it. I can put a minimum amount to, bring forward. And I can also round it to the nearest, amount I want to bring. Typically, for planning purposes, you don't need to dollar cents. You want to round it to the nearest estimate possible. So in this case, I'm going to round it to the nearest 1,000. I can run this process in a batch, but for this demo, I'm going to run it as an interactive one. So while it's doing that, it automatically created my plan. Now I'm going to take the same process and show you another way how I can use the same process to do the estimate. I only had the 6 months data, but I want to be able to project that into what would be my full year information. I'm going to run the same process. In this case, I'm not going to create a new plan. I'm going to update an existing plan. I also want to bring that scenario into a different scenario because I want to know what was the real actual and how much I projected that into an estimated number. So I can have a different scenario for that. I've got to pick up a document. And I'm going to say, I'm going to bring that into estimated. So how I'm going to calculate my estimated amount? For this simple demo, I'm going to say generally we spend more than what we spend in the first half. So I'm going to say it's probably 2.25 times my first half expense. I'm going to leave the rounding to the same amount and then put that into the PY estimated. So I'm able to use the same process and bring it into a different scenario using some kind of a, calculation for doing the estimated amount. Now that I've done that, let's go take a look at the actual plan that generated. As you probably expect, it should have two scenarios. You'll see the PY actuals I brought in initially. They're all rounded to the nearest 1,000. It has all the full details. And I can also look at my estimated, which will be 2.25 times of my actuals in this case, because that's what I wanted it to do. You will see the summary information on the fact box. And if you have any quantity-based information, you would see here. But in this case, since I'm doing the expense budget, I don't have any quantity information. But I haven't done the guidance part yet. If I look at the guidance, I have nothing done. But I want to be able to give that guidance. Let's just say this year we're happy people. We're going to do a 5% or 8% increase. How do I create that one? I want to be able to say, take a look at the estimated information, take all these things. This is where our allocation scenarios come into picture. I'm able to interactively do this, but you can also do the same things in the workflow. So this one, I'm going to show you the manual process. I'm going to say allocate budget. I'm going to say allocate across the periods. We support 5 different ways. One is the across periods. It's basically taking one data and distributing across time periods. The second one is I can distribute across dimensions. If you know the percentage of allocation, you can do that. You can do the aggregate, which is basically aggregating child plans into the parent plan. Or you can distribute, which is the reverse of that, which is basically allocating from the parent to the child. Then last but not least is also by ledger allocation rules. So if you wanted to allocate certain type of cost, let's say marketing cost, based on the last year revenue of the department, you can do that by using the ledger allocation rules. In this case, I'm going to do by periods. If I do periods, I have an easy trick to take. I'm going to say copy, which is basically allocate every percentage into the first time period, so it will just copy the data. And I'm going to copy that into my guidance. And I'm going to say, since Neil is in a happy mood, he says I can use 8% today. I could do any percent I want, I think. Right, I'm going to allocate. Now, interactively, it basically ran the process for every line I selected, and it created the guidance information. So you'll see that that's 1.8% of my estimated. So I have all this information in the thing. You'll also see that in the side again. Again, if I'm the finance person, I want to finally look at this in Excel, right? Doing it in the AX client, it gives me the ability to manage it. But if I wanted to see it, I want to see this in Excel. So similar to what you saw before, now it represents all this information, but it gives me the different scenarios side by side. I can look at it, hey, what was my actuals last year? How much it would have been for the whole year, and how much is the guidance. I can go make further changes if I want to say, maybe this department should get more. I can do that. Make all these changes. Once I make all the necessary, line item by line item changes, I'm going to go ahead and publish that document into AX again. So now I'm able to manage that data either in AX or I can manage my data in Excel. Doesn't matter which one I'm comfortable with. I'm able to do it in both ways. Now that I've done it, I'm going to save that document and come back and look at this document before I'm actually going to release it to my departments and the business units so they can go create this document. I want to do all those things, but I don't want to do these things manually. I want to be able to have the system manage this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this document to workflow and let workflow manage the next set of things the way I have designed my workflow process. Once I submit it, I'll show you some of the things we do behind the scene. So while it's doing the next steps, I'm going to go take a look at some of the setup information we have. The first thing I want to talk about is the budget planning configuration. So what we have done is we have consolidated all of the setup you need to do within one table of contents. If you go into the scenarios, this is where you define all the scenarios you're going to use, and it can be a monetary amount or it can be a quantity-based scenario.
And these can be reused across different budget planning processes.
Yeah. And then I have stages. This is where I define all my stages. And as Neil said, even stages are same thing. I can define them once. If I want to use the same stage in different scenario, processes, I can reuse them as well. Then I have my workflows. It tells you which set of stages are applicable in a specific workflow. And I can define workflow by each individual responsibility center. Even though I have one process for operational budget, I can have different set of workflows to manage the process for each department. I'll show you how that happens in the setup. Then Neil talked about scenario and constraint. In certain scenarios, you want to be able to edit them. In certain scenarios, you want to be able to only view them. Typically, all historical information, when I bring my actuals from GL, you don't want somebody to be editing that. So you want to be able to control that, and you do that through here, and you can set the access level to either edit or view. We talked about allocation schedules. It tells you all the different type of allocations you want to run them during the workflow. And the stage allocation tells you which allocation schedule need to be run at what stage. So I'm able to automate these things. This is basically the metadata I need to be able to automate my business process. That's basically what we are capturing here. And I can also look at the template. So these are all the templates I've defined. One of the work we did in the recent cumulative update is able to create the templates I just showed you. All of the templates, we were able to see it in the Excel process. They can all be generated through a wizard right here. You don't have to understand all of the complexities that's behind the Office add-in, the technology behind it, the services, the things that Neil talks about easily that I'm not familiar with. I can use this wizard to do all my steps. So the next thing I want to talk about is the process. So this is where you basically say what process I'm going to have in my system. As I said, we can support any type of process. In this case, I have one for HR, which we walked through. We are actually in the process of doing the operational budget. We have one for strategy, which actually we walk through. Then we will do the forecast at the end. So if you look at here, what we have in each process is it's attached to a ledger. It actually tells you which folder you want to use. For each process, you can have a different folder. It can be a SharePoint or a network location. And it allows you to say, maybe only HR team should have the forecast position document. The other operational budget, only the other people need to be able to access. So you might want a different folder for different processes. Then in the administration, you will attach the work organization hierarchy that will be participating in that particular process. In this case, strategy, you will see that only the finance department is participating. If I look at the OPEX, every department in the organization is participating. As I said, you can have different workflow for different types of organization. In this case, you will see that the departments have one and the business units have a different process. I'm able to attach the workflow the way I want to do for each of the organization units. Then lastly, one thing we can do is define what template I'm going to use and what activities user can take. In certain stages, you want to be able to say the user can actually add new lines. Maybe they can attach other child plans. They can modify. But once it's submitted, you don't want them to be doing anything. You can control what stage, what activity is allowed. So it gives you a lot of the flexibility. Everything is done through the setup. And once you have done the setup, you can activate or deactivate. Typically, each planning process happens during a period of the fiscal year. You want to say only during that period, I want the user to be able to create document. If I deactivate it, you will not be able to create any new document. The other thing is we also have, typically these things don't change year over year. Once you have set up, you want to be able to copy this information into the next budget cycle. You can just easily do that by copy. Then during the process, I might be interested in saying, hey, how is my organization doing in this process? Is the departments really creating their document? Are they submitting it? How progress they're making? I can easily do that right away here by looking at the process status. So what it does is it takes the organization hierarchy that's associated with that process, gives me a general high-level overview at each node. And I can look at it at any node. It will give me the count at that level. So I showed you all of these things. I'm going to show you one last bit of things about workflow, how workflow helps you do all these things. I'm going to just look at the department one. If you are familiar with the workflows, this should be fairly understood. This is where I'm modeling how my workflow is going to orchestrate my process for department level business process. You will see that it's transitioning to a department stage. It's copying something, that means it's doing some allocation. Then I want it to have some review. Then again, transition to submitted. So I'm able to do the metadata I defined in the configuration, put it into workflow. The system will manage the whole process for you. You don't have to worry about doing manually. Now that I've showed you all these things, let's see what happened to that budgeting that we submitted for the operational budget. You'll see that all of a sudden, while I was talking through all these things, the system is able to run that process and create two things. One is it started at the highest level, which was the operational budget. Then it will actually create the documents for the business units, which are my sales, my purchasing, and my services. Then from each of those business units, it will take it to the next level of the organization, which are departments. It will create automatically all those things because I had set up that workflow to do these tasks automatically. Let's take a look at one of these things. You will see that this particular document is assigned to Daniel, who is the manager for that particular organization unit. One of the things we also have, now that I showed you the organization level view, if I wanted to say, let me take a look at this particular document, which has a lot of child plans, how it looks, I can actually see this in a hierarchy again. Now this gives you the document level view. So you will see that I have one for services, one for purchasing, and one for sales, and I have one for professional services, which is my Daniel's budget plan. If I wanted to drill down from here, I can do that as well. So that takes me to the actual budget plan. What I'm going to do next is show you another capability that we have in AX. So I'm going to log in as Daniel, who is a very occasional user. He doesn't always use AX, and he doesn't have AX client on his machine. So I've logged in as Daniel here. He can do everything he needs to do for budget planning using our enterprise portal. So you don't have to have the full AX client. I can just do it here. And you will see when I refresh my role center, the document I just created is waiting for him to take action. I'm going to go take a look at that. So one of the things we have done here is this capability that we have on the budget plan details is exactly same as what you have on the client. So they are comparable. We have a full parity in functionality. You will see all the details lines the way you would see in client. You will see all the fact boxes. And then I can actually launch the worksheet so I can see the same information as I would have done as a central person who uses AX regularly. Typically the planning, in budget planning, you have a lot of people who use, but all they do is budget planning. They don't do anything else in AX. So they could use enterprise portal and get the full functionality of AX. So at this point there is no difference. You will see that my template is very different here. It's very detailed. In this case, I'm only seeing the plan for my department, nobody else's department. It only brought the lines from there. Here I've done a different kind of modeling. I have the estimated information that came from my finance department. It also shows me the guidance that was provided by them. But I wanted to generally see as a department user, I want to see how much I'm going to spend quarter by quarter. So for that, I have actually another model here. I can change this. It will tell me how it will impact my quarterly spending. And let's just say it gives me the 21,600. That's the guidance that's given by my finance. But I'm not happy with that. I'm going to say I probably need more money than that. Hopefully Neil, who's going to approve it today, will be in a good mood to accept my changes, right? So he's going to give me a lot of the money I need. I'm going to take that and publish that document into AX.
Swami, is that going to support you being able to go to Barcelona for the EMEA convergence?
I hope so. I'm hoping that that's one of the things I'm accounting for, that hopefully you'll approve that and let me go and share this beautiful functionality that you have built with more users. I'm going to save that, go back, and I'm still in my AP. I'm going to take the action and say, I made my changes. I'm happy with what I've done. I'm going to complete that. So now, as a Daniel, who is a departmental user, I'm able to make the changes without having the full client, but I never missed anything that I would have been able to do as a regular AX client as well. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back. Now I'll show you in a second. We'll close this. We'll close these things. Now you will see that the initial stage was department request. Now Daniel has done all his things. Hopefully it has gone into next stage. In a minute it will. So while it's doing that thing, I'm going to take an action on the next ones. As an administrator, I'm going to be able to override things. I'm going to go to the workflow, and I'm going to say, reassign this to myself. So I can actually, for the other department, I'm not going to have each of them log in and do the work. I will act super user here and take action on them. So what we have done is, the system is automatically able to take the central department's document, create information, the budget plan for each of the business units and department, send it through the workflow so they get notified, they can take actions, and when they are all done, we will go aggregate that into the things. So I'm going to go approve this, complete that information. So when I actually complete it without making any changes, my guidance from the finance department will become my request as well. Again, those things you can configure it. You can say if you don't do anything, you get 0 budget, or if you do nothing, you get what I told you to request. So both options are possible. Okay. Not sure why this guy hasn't accepted it. Let's take a look at it. Okay. I am going to reassign this myself because he has made the change. Looks like for some reasons the action from the previous one did not happen, but since I'm the super user, I will mark that as well.
And in any case, we say super user, but it is obviously possible with workflow to be able to assign it. Perhaps the other person is on vacation, their manager, or maybe another peer. I mean, that's pretty common. So we do support all the regular workflow functionality for reassigning.
So now you see that for that particular services business unit, let's go take a look at the services business unit document. You will see the information about it here. So this is 244. It has associated to all the department plans. So it has automatic association, which are the 250, 51, 52, which I actually took care of it. They're all in the submitted stage. Now at this stage, as a central, the business unit manager, I want to be able to aggregate the data that requested all my department and look at it for review purposes. I'm going to take a look at it here. First thing is I'm going to say, mark this as complete. At this point, it's going to make sure that all the associated plans are completed before it allows me to go to the next stage. Okay. In a second, you will see that right now it's in the distribute stage. It will slowly progress from distribute to aggregate and then get into the business review stage automatically through the workflow. So it's doing the BU roll-up. Now it's taking all the child plans and taking up the requested amounts and bringing it to the parent level. And in a minute, it will go to the BU review. At that point, I'll show you how all the information we have captured to this point, how they are coming. So now you will see that they are in the BU review stage. So it was able to aggregate the data, take it to the stage. At this stage, as a business unit manager, I can look at it and take action. So you will also see that it's assigned to your history. It's assigned to admin at this point. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at this document through the sheet again, because as a manager, I don't want to be looking at this data at the detail level. So when I click on the worksheet, system again uses the template I've defined for that particular stage and bring me the information. You'll see that this data is way different from the way the departments looked at it. Now it aggregated for all the business units and just show me, say, the account level. And I'm going to see, I can see the estimated guidance and the actual requested, and it will also show me what's the BU approved amount. As a BU manager, even though the departments requested different things, I'm able to control that and say, maybe I want to make changes. If I want to be okay with that, I can just leave them as well. So in this case, let's just say the thing I requested, Neil is not happy that I'm going to go to Barcelona again. He's going to say, no, you're not going to go. Good luck with that. And he's going to change it to my 50,000 back again. Since I asked more, he said, no, you're going to get less than what you actually were going to get if you had accepted my guidance. I can make these changes as a business unit manager because I have a much more global view. I'm going to make this change and then submit that to the AX again. Once I make these changes, the final thing I want to be able to do is route this document to CFO, so who can take a action on that. I'm going to do that, which in this case happens to be I have the power to do it. I will quickly walk through those stages. The last thing I'm going to do is take that final budget for that particular business unit and transfer it to the ledger so I can actually show you how budget control can be enforced at that point. You'll see that now the stage is CFO review, so I'm going to act as CFO now. Again, I can look at this in worksheet. At each stage, you can have a different template at different levels. Now, in this case, I actually unpivoted a little bit because I want to actually look at the business units and the departments, and I can see it, same level of information, but I'm able to represent this data at any level I want to see at each stage. So as a CFO, I'm going to let the business manager have their say. I'm going to accept whatever they're requesting, and then say, I'm going to be able to, view history. I think it's actually waiting for Sarah, who is my CFO. It looks like she's okay, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So let's.
Now, a lot of what Swami's showing here is he's showing an entire budget cycle for operational expense planning. It doesn't happen in an hour. So we're really doing, normally this is over a couple of months, in which case these workflows would be naturally occurring in the morning. You'd come in and you'd see a notice on your role center that it's available for you to review or take action.
That's exactly right. This is a cooking show. We're going to actually fast track everything like it happens in a minute. It doesn't really happen. You'll probably have a lot of negotiations, discussions. If we actually, if you have the presence control enabled, you can actually chat with them interactively, so you're able to collaborate at the same time. We also have the ability to say you can define security at the user group level. So you can say if Neil and I are in the same department, I might be the one who's preparing the budget, but I also want to collaborate with Neil. I'm able to do those things within the document as well. So we both can share, look at the document, make updates within the same department. So now that I've done it, you will see that it has gone to the final stage. So what I started in this process, if you recall, I started from looking at the historical data in GL. I looked at information for every department and business unit. I let the system create the plans for business unit and then department. Just one for one business unit and the department, I just went through the full cycle of request to approval, right? I've done that. Now I want to say, for this business unit, I want to transfer this final budget into my ledger so I can actually enforce budget during my operation things. How do I do that? Again, out of the box, we provide you some processes to actually create the actual budget entry in GL. I am going to run the budget register entry, and I'm going to pick my OPEX plan. Yep, I know that. I'll pick a different document number. I believe that was services. Right? Yep, 244. I'm going to say which scenario I want to do. I want to do the CFO approved because that was the final amount I want to do. And I want to bring them as 1/1/2014. Okay, I'm going to bring that into total budget model and leave the rest of the things default as what I had used last time. And I'm going to just generate it. You'll see that the budget register entry automatically created from that particular plan, from the scenario that I had created by the CFO approved amount. If I go back into the budget register entry, you will see that the budget register entry is created. I can take a look at it. One of the things we do is you may not be doing budget control at the actual detail level I created my plan. You will see that since my budget control was only enabled for my main account, system automatically aggregated all my data and brought over the ledger budget at the main account level. So again, system is smart enough to figure out at what level you're doing the budget planning and what level you're doing the budget control, and it automatically brings the information at that level. So I'm going to leave that at that point. So basically, we went through the full cycle of this process. We started from the top. We did the distribute for the business unit. I actually ran the distribution for the departments. From departments, we actually did the Daniel really doing his department request through EP. Then we submitted them. When all of those departments completed, the business unit is able to aggregate them, run through their process in the middle row there. We went through the final. Then I actually took that final document for the one business unit and put that into the ledger. So I'm able to do full life cycle from planning to the ledger budget. So a couple of things I want to just highlight here. We talked about allocations. We showed you the distribution. The distribution is used, distribute allocation is used whenever you're allocating from business unit to departments or in the finance to business unit. Aggregate is used whenever I'm aggregating the department request into the business unit. I showed you the allocate across the period doing the manual process. We didn't show the allocate to dimension in this demo, but it's available. We also have the allocation by ledger rules when you want to use some ledger rules to allocate some of the budget expenses based on another scenario.
And if you've used allocation in other modules, be it in the budget control or if you've used it into GL, it is the same setup data. It's the same pattern. We want you to use the same tools everywhere.
So at the end, what I did is, I was able to take the data. Now you're able to use the information I created in the budget register entry during the expenditure cycle. You can make sure that every document in the expenditure cycle, whether it's from requisition or PO or invoice, you can enable any of those documents to be budget control. If you want to be very conservative, you can start from requisition. If you want to be very liberal, you can just say, I'm going to just do budget control at the vendor invoice level. Depending on where you want to do, we provide the flexibility to do it. We also give you the multi-level control. You don't have to always check the budget at the level you record the transaction. You can always say, I'm going to only check my budget at the department level, and if the department has budget, I'm able to, I'm okay to spend that money. And we also provide override privileges. Certain times you always have to override the system controls. You can define different user rules and say, this user group can go above the threshold, this user group can go over the budget, and certain user group cannot go even above threshold. So you have the ability to control the level of access they have. Forecasting, that's the last piece I'm going to talk about. Now that we have done the strategy planning, we did the budgeting for the 1 year, we actually put it into the ledger. The next thing is I've spent a few months into the new year. I've actually seen some actuals. But your budget is never going to be exactly what you thought it's going to be. It's always going to be needed to be revised. For that, again, you can use the budget the process to do the forecasting. You can do any type of rolling forecast. It could be quarterly, monthly, or any time period you like to do. Typically, in this case, scenarios are, you always have the budget, you have the actual, and then you are going to revise your budget in the forecast scenario. Those are typically the 3 scenarios. Then you might have some scenarios to see what's the variance is going to look like. You can actually format them. So I'm going to keep this again simple. Department is going to do the forecasting. You'll have budget, actual, and forecast scenarios. As I mentioned, I'm going to just take it to the final stage, just to show you how the same functionality we have built can be tailored to meet your different budget processes. Thank you, Neil. So this is going to be a quick demo. I already actually have a ready-to-go document. You will see that I have a quarterly update for the FY13, which is actually for my last quarter in the year. Let's go take a look at it. You will see that there are some actual amounts, and I can pick up the different scenario, my forecast, which is typically what was in budget, but I can make changes. You will see the summary information here. And if I go to the worksheet, this is where you will see the beauty of how AX is able to take the information and present to you that you probably would expect for a finance person. This looks like the Excel sheet we get from our CFO, right? So you can see the different departments, and I can see the actual P1 budget. If it's there is an actual, you can see those actuals in the actual scenario, and it will show for the next 2 months, I only have my budget and I have my forecast, which is same as the budget. I can make changes if I can say maybe it's going to go up because I'm expecting some travel there, or maybe Neil wants me to go to Barcelona this time again. Yeah. I can make these changes, and I'm also able to take advantage of the standard Excel capabilities. I can see the variance here. I can put some indicator. I can do all kinds of formatting to see if I change my forecast, how it impacts my overall budget, right? Once I make these changes, I make these changes, publish it, and send it to workflow. Simple concept, but we are able to take the same set of processes and support everything within AX. So you don't have to have other systems or have a Excel-based solution to manage these things. You're able to do everything in AX. Hopefully, you have a good appreciation for what it is and how you can use and take advantage of this functionality that we have built in the last few years. I believe that brings us to the summary. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, well, now we're due for the second half of it. I think it's a 3-hour session, isn't it, Swami?
Yeah.
Just in summary, we've shown you a lot. There's a lot of different demos here. We haven't shown you everything. We haven't talked about the fact that we have the ability to bring in other data in. Obviously, we're a service, so if you have another third-party system to bring in some data, we brought it in from GL, we brought it in from HR, but we can also bring it in from another system. We have a lot of more information on the setup of the templates. We have reports. We have obviously, there's a data cube for budget control, but there's also another one for budget planning. I'd like to highlight, of course, that because we base it on Excel, we think the adoption is easy. We do use it internally for MBS, for our operational expenses. So that's always a good experience for us because we get to see a real customer use it and play with it before. And we'd like to highlight again that it's really nice to have for the version control and that it's all inside AX. You don't have to worry about, we call it Excel hell or something like that, and worrying about it's an email. Swami did not show, but you can work on edit the sheets offline and then publish them later and submit them. So there's quite a lot there, I mean, in terms of it, our reporting and all those activities. I'm to flip the thing here. So we do have a lot of other resources on both on customer source or mainly on partner source, in that we've scripts for this, for how to go through it, how to configure your worksheet, how to tweak that, strategies, some all the demo scripts on how to run this based on the Contoso data. One of the things we really didn't go into was the bottom-up budgeting. And we do have the ability so that you can set it up and say at the bottom level, instead of us going ahead and having it go all the way down, you can have each department create as many budget plans as they want. If you think of some areas, maybe they want to say, I want to do these initiatives. Each initiative could be done by a specific budget plan, and say in the public sector, where they like to do priority-based budgeting, you can decide that if you're you compare some safety versus some parks and recreation versus some other improvements to the roads. All of these things can be determined, aggregated, and rolled up. So instead of having merely one budget plan per department, you may have 20 or 30, and then you make a decision based on how much they're going to cost and rank those, so then you can report on them. But we really encourage you to go and have a look at those. And we even have a budget planning workshop. We've been able to hold it a couple of times here and in Europe, and it was really good for you to get a good feel for how this works through it.
Yeah. I think you touched upon the cube as well. We do provide an out-of-the-box. There is a cube comes out of budget planning, and you can use that with Power View to get really interactive visualization for how the different scenarios are working, who's spending. All of those things can be analyzed at an ad hoc basis using those cubes.
So I'm sure you've seen this. You've all been in other sessions. You know what the next steps are to come and see us. And we'd love to have, if you have any questions, please ask us now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
But if you have questions, just come up, use the mics or anything. We'll answer them as best we can, or you can talk to us later.
Question about the Dynamics AX add-in. We use it for our budget upload process and found it very glitchy. Have there been improvements made to that?
What version are you using? Let's start.
We're pre-R2.
You're pre-R2. Okay, yeah, we've done a significant amount of work on with the Office add-in. One of the things that you may have not seen is, I don't know if you noticed, but there was no ability to modify the structure of the Office add-in or modify or add rows as an end user. So we've locked it down from there so you can actually edit a budget worksheet. And but just been a lot of enhancements. We worked very closely with that team regularly. I think Chris will be showing a little later today on all the improvements that have been done.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people don't know that Office add-in was introduced in AX 2012. Yes, we did have some glitches, but when we did the budget planning in R2, it kind of forced us to say the Office add-in needs a lot more improvement, which helped us to make sure that we stabilized. As you saw today, I used Office add-in quite a bit, and there were no glitches. And we have done a lot of improvements there. The matrix capability was new in R2. You can actually do the lookups of the dimensions. A lot of the capabilities have been improved significantly. Yeah.
And even performance between the AX and loading it into Excel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, if we use cost accounting, our accounting will be more in cost accounting. Can we compare the actuals versus the budget?
So the question is, if they are using cost accounting, can I bring my actuals and then look at the comparison? Out of the box, there is no process. I showed you some of the processes, bringing data from HR, fixed asset, and GL. If you have the data in GL, which I believe you will have, and based on the main account and the categories, you can pull that information into a scenario, then you should be able to. But if there is some specific details, I can actually take it offline. But as long as you're bringing the data from GL, you can do it out of the box. If you want to directly go to the costing tables, then you will have to write some out-of-the-box process, some processes to bring that data to budget planning. But it's all service-based, so you should be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Another question over here?
Yes. While working with the Excel file that you mentioned, and all the examples that you gave is, you are assuming that you have the number that goes into the cell. And in reality, you have to make a lot of calculations in other spreadsheets. if you make these calculations, you can add spreadsheets to the Excel file and they remain?
Yes, we keep.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, the question was, what about the information? I have to do a lot of work in Excel in addition to just entering that magic number in. Because specifically, maybe I'm buying hardware and I want to have all the hardware costs. What we it's an Excel worksheet. Add as many tabs as you like, add as many other details as you like, and enter all that information. When you've got that done, and I think Swami's going to load up and show you, we store each version at each stage. So you'll be able to go back and reopen that one and see what the values are there. And you can add whatever you like.
All right, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. You want to show that, or?
If there are no questions, we'll.
Oh, we
show
got another question.
As say a CFO, I want to see a full company P&L and then be able to drill down to the lower level departments and maybe even come back up again. It seemed quite siloed, like you've got here one section of the organization.
I'd probably recommend using the cube at that point for some of it. I mean, we can show a summarized version or have multiple tabs, or use the Power View.
So your question is, I'm a CFO, I want to look at the whole enterprise. How can I do it? There are
And then also
drill
drill
down.
down.
Yeah. So there are two ways to do it. If you want to do this Excel side, you can do it. Actually, this gives, we always keep the data at the most granular level. You can bring the data there, and I showed you at different ways you can look at it. You can actually do a pivot table against it, and then you can drill down back and forth. You can have multiple tables on the Excel scenario. As Neil said, if you're really doing just an ad hoc analysis, you want to be able to do any kind of analysis, I recommend using Cube. And actually, if you use Power View, you really get rich experience in the analysis side. I showed that in one of my first day demo, but that was more around public sector, but it is possible.
And what about management reporter? Would you?
Great question. So what about management reporter? I'm assuming you're questioning, can I use this data in the management report for reporting purposes? The answer is yes. All the budget planning scenario data is also in the MR as well. So you can do budget versus actual based on the planning scenario as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. If you budget in a foreign currency, and you enable budget control, the control will be in the functional currency or in the...
You record the budget in any currency. There is a currency code on each of them, so you can record at that level. But if you want to record the budget in your functional currency, but you typically have transactions in different currencies, it will convert into the ledger currency and make sure that you're within the budget.
So the budget control will work on the functional currency?
Yeah.
Okay.
In one of your demos, you showed the business unit officer was approving an amount, and you reduced the amount of one of the line items. And that was several departments that were rolled up into that. How does it know what amount to reduce each of those departments by when you make that change at that aggregated level?
I could take that. Your question is what happens when you're looking at a summarized version and then you make a change, and what happens to the individual items that summarized is? It will do it proportionally. If you want to make an edit for it specifically, you'll have to probably have another tab with the specific versions where you can then override those values.
So it's basically a weighted average allocation. It will just say, I have 3 lines, this is the weighted average for those 3 lines. It will just distribute at that level.
So if I have a rogue manager that wants 10 grand more and everybody else goes with the expectation, then it's going to apply that unless I go into those individual departments and then adjust it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And one other question, when you guys were working in Excel and publishing it back to Dynamics, I understand how that works, but then when you were closing the Excel, you were hitting save. So I was wondering what the purpose of saving each of those Excel workbooks if it publishes back to AX.
So I can answer that. Your question is, what's the save doing? Do I need to save? Can I just exit? And for Excel, and the answer is you can just exit. However, the man over here was asking about the data and whether it was stored. We're going to capture the most recent version. So you make additional modifications to additional tabs, then you'll definitely want to save it. If you don't make any modifications at all, then there's no need. And it will reload the data automatically when you open the form again.
So the publish does is basically saves the bound columns into AX, because those are the data AX understands. But if you have other information, like, as Neil said, the gentleman asked, what if I have another tab which helps me calculate? If you want to save those information into that worksheet, so when you come back, you can look at it, you want to save. If you don't save, the information that you added outside of those bound columns are lost.
And it's just saved in a directory that you've pointed it to, like
Yeah.
Be it on
SharePoint or
SharePoint
something.
or some other file share.
It could be a SharePoint or a network location.
Okay, thanks.
Great questions. Thank you.
Question around cash management. Does this accommodate a 12, 18, 24-month rolling forecast? So when you update your forecast and you change your assumptions going forward, it'll bridge year ends and you can actually get visibility a year out, 2 years out?
Certainly, the question is, how about cash flow? Can I do a multi-year cash flow forecast using this process? Did I get that question right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I showed here a quarterly forecast. In our case, there is no reason for you to take that into multi-year. So for us, it's just a budget cycle time period. In your case, if you want to do a 3-year cash forecast budget cycle, you would create a budget cycle for 3 years, and you can do it at the monthly level, quarterly level, or the annual level, and you can look at the data for the whole period.
Okay, great. And the other question I have is just related to sort of sensitivity analysis around this. When you look at these costs, you're building up all of your individual line items by drivers.
Yeah.
Some are fixed, some are variable. If
Yeah.
you were to change some assumptions around your top line sales, does that flow through on your forecast? Can you do that type of sensitivity analysis?
So the question is about what kind of sensitivity analysis or how much I can manipulate the worksheet and I'll build my own things. What we do is think a couple of things I want to show you here. I talk about a little bit technical because there are things that are bound to AX. Okay, so those columns are actually assigned to something back in AX. Those things cannot be manipulated. But if you want to do that kind of an analysis, you can also always add another column, which basically captures your recalculation. And once you have it, what we don't have today is you can't take that scenario and automatically populate another one. That step has to be done manually. But you can do all the sensitivity analysis using those modeling and variables, but you have to put it into a non-binding column to the AX. Then from that scenario, you copy it into another one. I actually showed, I believe, in one of the scenario, because I was doing a lot of the request, total cost, based on 20%, 30%. You remember, in one of the department scenario. But then I took that last amount and put it into the requested amount. That step has to be done manually. But you can do all of the rest of the calculation based on, fixed variable, those, variable modeling. You can do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks again. Hopefully you all enjoyed it and appreciate your feedback and enjoy the rest of the conference.